Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast has evolved over the 5+ years since it first launched. From now on, I'm going to be talking about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. And also mindset, of course, but mindset of all kinds, not just business mindset. I think. Things are changing for me, as you may have noticed if you've been following me online or listening to this podcast, so anything goes here. I hope you stay along for the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today, and now let's get into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 298. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another co-hosted episode with the fantastic Joe Casey. Today, we are going to talk about my upcoming book and how you can write and self-publish a book. I know we have talked about this before, but we go kind of more in depth into not just the practical stuff, but also the inner work that I needed to do in working on my upcoming book project, which will be coming out live on the 22nd of this month. So in just 2 weeks from now, that's a Monday, Earth Day. So I'm super excited about this book. I have done so much. I've worked harder on this book than any of my previous books, and I've invested more money into it as well. So I'm really excited to see how this book does compared to my previous books. Was it worth it to invest this level of money into it? And we shall see. I think Joe and I will be doing an updated version of this episode in a couple of months or maybe 3 months once we know the results, because I really want to be honest with you about my journey with this. I know a lot of people who listen to this show and friends of mine want to write their own book, so the more information you have, the easier that will be. So, what does it take to publish your book, both inner stuff and outer stuff? In this episode, you will learn what it takes to write a book. You will learn the full process that I use to write my upcoming book from concept to publication. You will learn how things have changed in independent publishing over the last couple of years since we did our first episode on self-publishing. You will learn the do's and don'ts of book cover design, including tips that can make or break your book. You will learn a super easy and affordable way to crowdsource your book cover design, which is also super fun. You will learn how to print your paperback without ending up with a garage full of books, because no one wants that. You will learn how to deal with the inevitable mindset stuff that comes up along the way. And finally, I will be talking about why I believe we need to keep doing the mindset work throughout the project. I really enjoyed this episode. I think it's super useful for people who have maybe once thought about writing a book but not taken the action, or who have an idea but maybe believe they're not good enough. And that was the key limiting belief that this book triggered for me. I am not good enough. So I had to do a ton of work on that for this book. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to invite you to join me on Patreon. If you get value from this podcast, I would love for you to head over to Patreon and support me there to make sure that this podcast can continue production. This podcast is not really tied into my business. It's kind of loosely related to it. So it's not like I make ton of money off the back of this podcast. In fact, it costs me money because I have to invest in not just my time, but also the person who edits and publishes this for me. So that is an investment. And I would love for you to support me there. If you head to patreon.com/Holly Wharton, and that's patreon.com/Holly Wharton, you can join me there. Membership starts at just $1 a month, and you get exclusive access to content I don't share anywhere else, including a monthly Q&A and done-for-you mindset work. So, moving on into the episode. I hope you find this episode interesting and useful. I think it's super practical. I have updated the PDF download, so you will be getting an updated download if you head over to the show notes for this episode, which is hollywharton.com/298. Without further ado, I would like to pass you over to the episode.
Hi everybody, this is Joe Casey. Welcome to my joint monthly podcast with the amazing Holly Wharton. Yay! Hello! So Holly, this is an exciting time for you because you're about to publish your book.
Yay!
And so we thought it would be perhaps a good opportunity to talk about the process of writing the book, the process of kind of publishing it, and then of course the whole content and subject matter, which has been such an emotional kind of coming out for you.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to dig into all of that good stuff. So when does the book come out?
It is released 22nd of April, which is Earth Day.
Okay. And it's a non-negotiable deadline.
It is a non-negotiable deadline, as we were discussing before we started recording this.
I see the fact that it's Earth Day, and I didn't realise it was Earth Day when you said, I was like, can you not be flexible with the deadline? Deadlines can be flexible if they're self-imposed. Okay, I get you. But no, you were very much kind of, no, it is non-negotiable. So would you mind telling people who maybe don't know about the book what it's about?
Yes. So I was out last January of 2018 on a forest bathing meetup. And I'd heard about forest bathing before, and I'd always wanted to try it. And so when I saw that there was a forest bathing meetup group in my area, I immediately jumped to sign up. So what forest bathing is it's a Japanese concept of kind of healing through the trees. So it's something that's actually prescribed by the Japanese version of the NHS for people who are suffering from stress, anxiety. And it just involves going out into the forest, going out into the woods, and bathing in the energy of the trees. So I was out on this meetup group, and towards the end of it, they led us all into a grove of ancient yew trees. And they said, find a tree and connect with it. So I instantly knew which yew tree I wanted to connect with. And I walked over to it, and I wrapped my arms around it, and it started talking to me. And it said, you know, the book that you're working on right now, which was a novel, you're having problems with it. And I have a new idea for a book for you, because we trees have stories. We all have stories to tell. And we would like you to go out into the woods, collect the stories of trees, put them into a book, and get that out there to the widest audience possible. Because the more that people hear our stories, and the more that people connect with nature, the more that we can reestablish, reconnect a healthy relationship between nature and humanity. And we can rekindle the healthy, balanced relationship that nature and humanity once had. So that was how I got the idea.
So just to be clear, It was in this conversation you had with this tree who basically said, look, this is the way you should be going, and kind of said, you know, we're going to share our stories with you if you're willing to listen.
Yes. Kind of gave it to me as like a task, though. Like he was asking it to me, but I also kind of felt like this was my job.
Like, well, don't mess with an ancient, you know, tree. Those guys have seen shit. I know we've had this conversation before, and there is a previous episode that we did around this initial kind of connection that you had with the trees. But I'll link to that in the show notes. But if I'm remembering it correctly, the trees that you were talking to initially were men trees?
Yeah, so when I first started talking to trees, I often heard a male voice in my head. And I talk about this in the book because the vast majority of the trees in the book I also heard with a male voice, with the exception of some very notable exceptions. So I had a group of trees called the grandmothers. I had the three witches. These are trees from the book, and they all have very distinctive female voices. But by and large, when I talk to trees, I hear a male voice in my head. So yeah, it's interesting.
I mean, I'm sure there's nothing to be read into. I just find it really interesting because when I listen to the podcast, we'll know kind of bits of this story already. But so just over a year ago, I got really quite sick with my kind of recurrent depression and anxiety. And one of the things that I found myself just kind of craving doing every day, and I think was one of the things that really kind of salvaged my sanity, was going out and actually touching the trees. I'm really lucky. I live in a city, but I'm literally a 5-minute walk from a wooded area, some quite kind of old, really well established trees and a river, and it's really very beautiful. And so that kind of urge to get out in nature every day and really experience the nature rather than have my headphones in, be listening to a podcast or, something like that. Just walking with the dog in nature just became this urge that I just kind of had to do it. It was almost like, I don't know, my spirit was kind of saying, you need to have that connection. This is part of the healing that you need to do. And one of the things that I found myself doing was I had this urge to kind of just touch the trunks of the trees. And at first it was like almost like feeling an electrical current or something. Just a really mild one, just a really nice one when I touched the trees. And then after a while, the trees, it seemed like they were kind of like whispering little words of encouragement and tales of resilience to me, which I really didn't just thought, okay, this is weird and you are ill right now. And
obviously that's why this is happening.
but the thing is, even at the time, I kind of thought, this isn't about you being ill. And this is not something for you to overthink. So I just made this conscious decision that, okay, I'm just going to accept the fact. I didn't kind of go down the route of, okay, now I'm hearing good voices talking to me. Of course, I did not tell people this at the time. Well, I did. I told a few people, but the voices were always female to me. And they still are. I still kind of go out and just like, I'll say good morning to the trees and things like that. And they'll say good morning. They were always female, but perhaps that was because that was the energy that I kind of needed. Yeah. I needed those kind of voices of encouragement and resilience and just that very kind of female nurturing kind of messaging.
Yeah. And I've wondered that too. I wonder if kind of my reconnection to nature and hearing the male voices of trees has to do with me healing relationships with men in general. So I've actually wondered that as well, if that's just what I needed to hear.
I think that we're very good at putting our own kind of little human spin on things that are so much bigger than us. But I don't think they mind.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And I discuss this in the book too, in the introduction as I'm explaining this. And I say I don't think it's important whether I'm hearing male or female voices, because also the vast majority of the trees and the plants are, botanically speaking, something that's known as monoecious, which means that they have both male and female flowers on each tree. So most trees and plants are both male and female.
Oh, well, that's just lovely.
Some trees and plants aren't. So like hollies, you'll either have a female holly or a male holly. But the vast majority of trees and plants are both male and female. So they've got both energies and both flowers within.
That's it. And of course, you know a lot of this from studying around kind of plant spirits and things like that at the moment.
Yeah, actually, it goes way back even further. When I was 15 years old and I got my first job, I worked at a place called Mount Ayr Garden Center. And I worked there for 7 summers, all throughout high school and university and into grad school. And that's where I started to learn about the practicalities of plants. And when I went to university, I wasn't sure what I wanted to study. And I started out studying ornamental horticulture before I changed to English. So I had to take a lot of botany courses and, plant-based sciencey stuff. And that's where I learned a lot of the kind of technical, botanical plant stuff.
That's really cool. There's me trying to make it all kind of spiritual, just no, natural, proper kind of science. So I want to kind of ask you a little bit more about the process then of turning this into a book, because we did a podcast a few months ago when you were kind of mid-process of the writing. You've now finished the writing.
Yes.
You're now weeks away from publishing it. So what's that process been like for you on an emotional level? And then I'd love to dive into some of the kind of the practicalities for folks who are wanting to not necessarily publish their book Tree Stories, but publishing generally.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So emotionally, what's it been like? Has it been a really super easy journey for you? She says, leading the witness.
Piece of cake, a walk in the park. No, it hasn't. I've had to do a lot of mindset work to make this book happen. And I think that if I hadn't done the mindset work, I wouldn't have gotten to where I am today, because I was given the idea for this book in January. And from there, whenever I went out on my walks, certain trees would reach out to me and say, I'm in your book, or I'm not in your book. And so I kind of made a mental note of which trees were in my book. And it was winter, so I really didn't want to sit and connect with a tree for 20 minutes and channel a story. So I actually waited until the spring equinox of last year to get the story for my first tree. And so that was kind of ground zero on the book. So I'd been given the idea a couple of months prior, but I started work on the spring equinox of 2018. And I had so much resistance. I mean, I've been channeling for a few years now, a handful of years, but it triggered all of my insecurities. You know, I thought, am I good enough to receive these tree stories? Because you said they were super important and it's my job to get them out into the world. What if I'm not channeling the full story, but just like a superficial level of it? And maybe there's like more deeper that I can't get to because I'm not good enough. Basically, I'm not good enough. That was kind of the limiting belief that kept getting triggered over and over. And so that was when I started. I received in early spring a handful of stories and then kind of went through summer, which is the best time of the year to be sitting in stillness in the nature, and I didn't do anything. And then when I was starting to get into autumn, that was when I just kind of kicked myself in the butt and just started going out there and connecting with the trees that had said they were in my book. And then from there, it just kind of snowballed and more trees were stepping up. And I had some amazing days where I was just getting fantastic connections with the trees. And then I wrapped up the final, kind of receiving the final story on the winter solstice of last year. So it was kind of from spring equinox to winter solstice, I received the stories. And in that time, so many roller coasters of ups and downs with, am I good enough? Can I do this?
That's really interesting because that whole idea of am I good enough is such a recurring theme for I think most humans who have any element of kind of self-reflection and self-awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's not an easy straight line process, but what are some of the things that you did to do some healing around that?
So lots of heart-centered energy work, lots of Psych-K, like creating specific belief statements about I can do this, I'm a good channel, I'm a clear channel, I receive the full stories of trees, I can make this book a reality. I would have to go through my journals to see the specific belief statements that I used, but it was a lot of that kind of stuff. It was basically like, I can do this and I can do it well. So lots of mindset work.
Yeah. There was part of me kind of going, yeah, okay, just give us like the easy work. There's still a part of my brain or a part of my psyche that's like, oh, where's the shortcut? And there just isn't one. That's the thing. There just isn't one. I mean, I know that, and Psych-K is something that you trained in quite a number of years ago. And I know that is what quote unquote, a short intervention kind of therapy, a bit like kind of some of the NLP work and things that I do. But even using tools like that, it's still not a kind of a switch. You just go, oh, I'm totally healed now. I have no self-doubt.
No, because the way I experience it is I do the mindset work. It kind of helps lift me up to another level where I can step out of my comfort zone and take new actions. But then once I've taken those new actions, it triggers my other shit. So then I have to do more mindset work to grow even more. So it's like I'm growing, doing the work, growing, doing the work, growing, doing the work. But I have to keep doing the work. Otherwise, I keep hitting another ceiling. So for me, it is absolutely, it's like I go through cycles and cycles and cycles of doing the work and taking the action and doing the work and taking the action. And I have to keep doing it. Otherwise, I will get stuck again.
But that's the thing, right? But I see a lot of the spiritual bypassing or something the easy, just add water and you're totally like, your vibe is elevated type stuff in the online space, especially in the kind of online personal development space and business space, which is where I spend too much of my time. This idea that, well, we have the tools and you just think the thought and then that's it, you're kind of healed. But no, you have to do the work. You can't just do the mantras or do the healing and then that's it now. We can't avoid doing the work and kind of getting down in the in the metaphorical mud and I imagine the literal mud for you at times because you're out there with
absolutely.
The trees.
Absolutely. You've got to do the work and take the action. Otherwise, stuff isn't going to just magically, this book would never have just magically appeared on my computer as a file. I had to go out there and I had to do the work.
Yeah. I think that is a definitely recurring theme for me and my work work is kind of reminding us that we don't get to bypass the doing the work bit as much as we would like to. And you're somebody who is, you know, really kind of spiritually connected and switched on. And yet your philosophy is very much that, no, you use these tools so that you can kind of, you know, do the work, and then you have to do some more healing, and we bring up other stuff. It is this kind of cycle that we need to go through.
Yeah.
We don't like to shortcut it.
So I don't believe in hustle. I don't believe in feel a fear and do it anyway. I don't believe in pushing. That does not work for me. That is why I do so much mindset work, because I want to make it easier for me to take the actions that scare the shit out of me, and make it easier for me to take the actions that are outside of my comfort zone. So that's kind of part of the reason why I'm constantly doing mindset work. And I don't mean constantly. It's not like I'm doing it every day, but whenever I feel like I'm scared to do something, or I'm hesitating to do something, or I'm procrastinating on doing something, that's when I stop and say, let's make this easier.
Mm. Do you mind if we talk a little bit about the kind of the practical steps then from what you do? So you gathered these stories.
Yes.
Then how does it go from I've gathered these stories to I now have a book coming out in, you know, the middle of April?
Okay. So it wasn't just I collected the stories and then I started on the book. Like, I was working on the book throughout the entire year. So the way it worked was I was verbally channeling the stories of the trees. So I had my phone, I spoke the stories into my phone, had my fabulous transcriber, who also does the transcriptions for the podcast, listen to them, transcribe them. She does an excellent job of transcribing. She would send them back to me. I would pop them up into Scrivener, which is the software I use for writing books. And I would kind of edit through them, and then I would add kind of the meat around that story. So I would talk about my experience as I approached the tree to receive its story. Like, what does the setting look like? What does the tree look like? You know, what was the day like? What was the weather like? And then afterwards, I would kind of add my reflections on what that story meant to me or what it gave to me. And then I would ask kind of questions to the reader, like, how do you feel about this? What do you think about this? It was like kind of adding the meat to each chapter that went around the story. And then I was writing the introduction, and I was writing kind of, you know, all the other chapters that go before and after the stories. So throughout all of last year, I was working on this, and I was doing my workcation weekends to kind of really intensely work on the book. And then after winter solstice of last year, that was when I'd received the last story, and I really kind of geared up towards finishing the manuscript so that I could send it to an editor, got it back from the editor, and then, I know you're not supposed to do this, but continued editing stuff myself. Like, I keep touching it. Like, theoretically, the book was done on Monday of this week. And I had the print formatted and the ebook formatted, and I still keep like touching it. I keep fiddling with it every day because I keep seeing like little things that I think, oh, I must change that one word. So yes, I don't believe in perfection, but I do believe in making it the best possible book I can. And the beauty of self-publishing, because I am an independent publisher and I publish my own books, is that if 2 weeks from now I discover there's another typo, I can just update the files and upload them online because I do print on demand, and it's all instant. So I can make changes whenever I want, but I want the first version of this book that goes out there to be as clean as possible.
Mm-hmm. Could we dive into some of that a little bit more in terms of the practical things? Because I know that there are people listening to this now going, oh, I would love to write a book. But then as soon as you Google how to write a book, there's like 70 billion web pages about this. And I know this is something that you have real expert in, because expertise in. How many books have you written now?
This is my ninth.
Your ninth book. Okay.
Yes.
So was there a particular reason that you decided to self-publish as opposed to go down a traditional publishing route?
Yes, absolutely. So I self-published my first book in 2016, so just about 3 years ago. However, I first started thinking that I wanted to write a book in 2011, and I spent kind of that chunk of time fiddling around with the idea and not really doing anything about it. But from that first kind of practical declaration of I'm going to write a book, I always knew that I did not want to be traditionally published. I wanted to be an independent publisher, Because I think, I've been self-employed since 1999. I like doing things how I want, when I want, where I want, on my own terms. I want to hire the cover designer I want. I want to hire the editor I want to work with. I want to hire the, audiobook editor that I want to work with. Like, I have a team of people who have worked with me on my previous books and who I've worked with on other authors' projects because I used to help with project management for authors. I have these people that I know, I like, I trust, I want to work with them. And I don't want to work with a publisher who's going to tell me, this is your cover, we decided this up for you. This is your editor, because that's who has time in our schedule. I want to be able to pick my team. And I want to be able to use the technologies that I believe in. So print on demand. I don't believe in printing 1,000, 2,000 copies of a book. I want to do print on demand because A, it makes sense not to print a ton of books that are just going to sit in a warehouse while they, little by little are purchased, but also because it allows me to make those changes. So as I said, if I find a typo 2 weeks from now, I can just change that in the file, upload the new file, and boom, the next book that's printed has that fixed. So being an independent publisher allows me to do exactly what I want, manage the project exactly how I want, and I'm my own boss. Whereas if I were to go through a traditional publisher, that publisher would essentially be my boss. And I don't like that. Like, I want my book to be exactly what I want it to be.
Okay. You get all of that kind of control, which for the control freaks of us out there sounds great. Are there any downsides to self-publishing? Any reasons why you could see somebody may want to go to a traditional publishing house?
Yes, absolutely. If you don't want to manage the project yourself or hire someone to do it for you, then there's a lot of elements to it. So you've got to write the book. You've got to send it to an editor. You've got to get it back from the editor. You've got to, decide which of their suggestions you're going to take and which ones you're not. You've got to get the ebook formatted. You've got to get the print typeset. You've got to get the cover designed. You've got to, if you're going to record your own audiobook, record it yourself and then get someone to edit it or hire a voice actor to do it for you. There's so many different elements to this. You've got to buy your ISBN numbers. Like, there's so much little stuff that you have to do, which if you know how to do it, it's not hard. But I recognize that some people don't want to manage their own project. And so you could either go with a traditional publisher for that, or there are some kind of, I don't know whether they're called hybrid publishing models, but like publishing houses that aren't really publishing houses. They just kind of manage the project for you. Now, that can be a good solution, but it can also be a very expensive solution. It's definitely much less expensive to do it on your own because you can choose, again, who you work with. Are you going to pay $500 for a cover? Or are you going to pay $5,000 for a cover? There's a huge range in options. And so publishing yourself also allows you to decide what your budget is and how you're going to allocate the budget. So why would you want to go with a traditional publisher? You would also want to go to a traditional publisher if you want to make it easier for your book to get into bookshops. However, that's also not guaranteed because publishers don't do a lot of marketing for you these days. This is not like the old days when you would get a big advance. Advances are really small. You would get a big advance. They would do tons of marketing for you. That's not happening these days. Publishers are really strapped for money, and they're only going to invest money in you if they think they're going to get back that return on investment. So I don't know, prestige. A lot of people still have that kind of, which I think is a false belief, that being traditionally published gives you kind of a certain level of prestige because you have been chosen by the authority in publishing, which means nothing to me.
I have also heard from friends who have been published by traditional publishing houses that they, first of all, they were required to have a certain kind of platform size before being... So already you have to be able to prove that you're bringing a certain audience size. And then I certainly know of two friends who did it and were quite surprised that they got more or less zero kind of marketing support, and they still had to do all of that marketing themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the book tour and arrange the travel and, you know, everything.
Publishers, unless you're a big name author, obviously then you're taken care of because the publisher knows that you're a cash cow and you're going to be bringing in money for them. But if this is your first book, if no one knows who you are, they're not going to do much, which is why they want you to have a platform to start with, because they want to make it easier for them to sell books. They don't want to do a lot of work.
So how do you go about finding things like, and finding people like an editor? Do you have people recommended to you? I mean, I don't know. I would think, how would I go about finding someone?
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to people who have self-published to ask if they like their editor. I'm very fortunate in that I've been doing some work for a nonprofit for the last few years. My husband does the book, kind of managing the projects. And so he's got a whole team of proofreaders, editors, people that he's worked with. And, I've been in touch with them as well to work with different aspects of my projects over the years. So people that ask me. I mean, I'm happy to, refer people to people because it's hard to find good people who work within your budget and who do good work. So, absolutely. And editors can be very expensive. Obviously, if you want quality, you're going to have to invest some money. But I think sometimes it can be really, really outside of a lot of people's budgets.
Right. Okay.
So you need to kind of shop around and see that balance for quality and what you can afford.
Mm-hmm. And so if you find an editor, would you recommend kind of editing it yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Before you send it to the editor, you absolutely have to edit yourself. Like, I did not send my first draft to the editor. I sent my, 11th draft to the editor.
No, I meant, would you recommend just kind of not hiring an editor?
Yeah,
just doing it yourself, yeah.
You can absolutely do that. If you ask anyone who's like an expert in self-publishing, they're going to say, no, absolutely not. You must always have an editor. And obviously an editor is going to help tighten up your writing and make it better. So I'm going to tell you a secret, and that is, this is the first book that I've used an editor for. All of my previous books, I did have someone look through it, but not like real editing. So I did not have my first 8 books professionally edited because I've been writing for years. I think I'm good at editing my own work. I think I write clear sentences and I felt comfortable doing that. This book, however, because I'm so insecure about it in so many ways, I just wanted to make it the best book possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you get back from the editor. Then what about things like typefacing? And I mean, I know it's meant to be super. Am I saying this as somebody who has really no clue about how any of this works in practical terms? But I have friends who've kind of self-published and things like that. So do you think the documents have to be in a certain format to go on things like Amazon and Kindle and and print on demand and things?
So when you finish the book and you have it formatted, you've got kind of 2 kinds of formatting. So you've got ebook formatting, which you will be producing 2 files, a Mobi file, which is for Kindle, and EPUB, which is for every other e-reader. And on the other hand, for print, you've got basically a PDF. But it's not just a Word document you've converted into PDF. It needs to be formatted for the size of the book, with margins and everything kind of, so it looks like a book. So it doesn't look like a Word document. So you need to either have a professional do this for you. And I always, for years, for my first 8 books, I had a professional ebook formatter do my ebooks, and I had a professional typesetter do my typesetting. And then last year, I bought this software called Vellum, and I'll link to that in the show notes. Vellum is fantastic. For the cost of what it cost me to have one ebook formatted professionally, I can do it myself. I can do as many books as I like because I bought the software. So Vellum will help you format your ebooks and your print books. So this is the first book that I'm doing that way because, again, I really like the idea of being able to tweak little details in the book and have the files myself and have the control over the files to make the changes myself rather than having to contact my typesetter and say, hey, can you change this word? So this is kind of an experiment for me, but I really, really like this software. It produces really beautiful ebooks and print books, and I'm loving it so far.
That sounds absolutely great. I'm actually pulling up. Do you remember we did a podcast back in 2016 and it was all about self-publishing?
Yes.
And so I've just found you produced this amazing PDF document all about all the different things. I'm wondering if all the different kind of stages and tools and what to do at different stages and things like that. I'm wondering if we could do like a little bit of an updated version of that and put it out with this podcast because things
have changed since then. I mean, Vellum wasn't around in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
This is new and it's awesome and it's affordable. I think it was like $299 or $249. Like it's totally affordable. And then you can do as many ebooks and print books as you like with it because it's you own the software.
So how does that compare to, say, hiring a typesetter? That's cheaper than you would pay somebody.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So I used to pay my ebook formatter. I think I used to pay him $299 per ebook. So that's kind of pricey. And then my typesetter, I worked with a guy in India and he charged me $100 per typeset book. So, that's $400 per book. Yeah. Whereas this, it's now free because I've invested in the software.
That sounds great. And so do you find that things like the software is improving as the industry kind of moves more over into self-publishing?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And more people are self-publishing. More and more people are wanting the control over the process. And so companies are creating software that allows authors to do this on their own and do it in a way that looks professional and beautiful. Vellum creates really lovely books, and it has several different templates. So you can choose which template you want to use for print and for ebooks. And it's really, really lovely, and it looks very professional, and it's very easy to use. I watched, I think it was a half an hour or 20-minute video that Joanna Penn had done on how to use Vellum, and that was it. I knew enough to get started.
That sounds ace. That sounds really good. Because again, my only knowledge comes from friends doing it, but I my friend Laura just had real headaches with using the Amazon Kindle uploader and getting it into the right format and things like that.
Yeah, let me say that. I have never used, there are lots of online services like Amazon and where you can upload your Word doc and it will format, quote unquote, the ebook for you. And yes, technically it does, but it's going to look like shit. So either pay someone to do it for you or get Vellum and do it yourself, but do not take a Word doc and just upload it and trust that it's going to be fine, because technically it will work, but it's not going to look great. It's not going to look professional, and it's going to be a headache. So do yourself a favor and do it right.
So I know that you are not the kind of person who will say, willy-nilly spend all of this money if it's not necessary. So actually, if you're saying it's worth $250 by a country mile for you to do this, then I am putting that on my list of things to check out if I ever write a book.
And absolutely, for people listening to this, like, only invest in the software if you think you're tech savvy enough to do this on your own. I hired people for the first 8 books, and I am good at like learning new software. So it was really easy for me to pick up. But if you know that you're not very tech savvy, then, just pay someone to do it for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. So you typeset it, and then I know that recently you've been kind of crowdsourcing information about your book cover. So how do you go about because I remember you saying this to me as well, that actually designing a book cover is a real specific skill. You don't get just your standard graphic designer. You really should be getting somebody who specializes in book covers.
Absolutely, because the book cover, to someone who doesn't know you, who's just coming across your book for the first time on Amazon, that is the most important part of the book, because that's all they can see. That's their first kind of experience with the book. It's their love at first sight or hate at first sight. It's going to help them decide whether they're going to click to learn more and possibly buy the book or click away onto something else. So it absolutely needs to be super professional, done by a graphic designer who specializes in book cover design, because there's kind of like a graphic language for book covers that I think general graphic designers don't necessarily speak. So you got to look at other books in your genre. What do you like? What do you dislike? Have some examples of hopefully 4 or 5 examples of what you do like, and be able to explain why, and then send them to your designer and say, hey, this is what I like, this is what I want. I have always worked with, so for my previous 8 books, I worked with Kim Killian, who is a really good cover designer. She does both fiction and nonfiction. She actually specializes in romance covers. She's so good at those. But she's also done nonfiction covers, including designing covers for Deepak Chopra and other traditionally published authors. So I had worked with her for the past 8 books, but for this book, I wanted to do something different. So I used a service called 99 Designs, which is where you upload your design brief, and then dozens, hundreds of designers from all over the world create designs and kind of compete against each other to create your ebook cover or your book cover. So that's why I was crowdfunding it, because I sifted through, I think it was 160 different ebook covers. And I had, asked them to tweak this, tweak that, make this little change. So they were constantly updating. And I paid extra to do a 3-day project rather than 7 days. And so you have to constantly be checking throughout the day, seeing the new ones, giving people feedback. You reject the ones that you straight out know you don't want. And then you get to the end where you can create a poll with your top 8 favorite books and ask people to vote on them. I absolutely loved 99 Designs, and I will be using them in the future for like book covers because it's amazing. You just you get access to, I probably had at least 40 or 50 different graphic designers creating covers for my book. You don't get that normally. You'd have to pay someone. Whereas 99 Designs, you only pay if you select a design. If all the designs, by some stroke of terrible luck, were terrible and you didn't like any of them, then you would not choose any of them and they would refund your money.
So these people kind of like, they're almost like doing work on spec, hoping to get paid. Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. I can't believe people do this, but I guess they have time. I don't know because a lot of people spent time making lots of little updates that I asked them, could you make my name different font, or could you make the title bigger, or could you change this? And so people were constantly tweaking things. And in the end, of course, I could only choose one. So, lots of people did lots of work and didn't get selected. But I guess that's what they know. They know that's an option.
Yeah. Wow, I'm feeling like, I don't know, empathic overwhelm just at the thought of getting 40 designs.
No, 40. No, it was 40 designers probably, because I see. Right. About 160 designs total.
Whoa.
Yeah, over the course of 3 days. So it was like every couple of hours I was checking back in, rejecting, asking for updates. It was really fun. And then my husband and I would look at them together, and we would like do the Apple Sync thing to the TV, and we'd put the covers up on the TV. So so it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and I'm really happy with the cover that I got.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And so then presumably it's a question of kind of distributing it to the various outlets and print on demand and things?
So then from there you upload it to KDP, which is for Kindle. I used to use the same company that I used for ebook distribution. Sorry, for ebook formatting, I would use them for extended distribution. I won't be using them for this book. I will be uploading it to a new, well, it's not new, but it's new to me, company called Draft to Digital, where they will do the extended distribution for you. So you need to upload the files there. Same thing for your print book, upload it to KDP Print. And then I'm going to be using, again, for the first time, I want to say Lightning Source, but it's the other company, Ingram Spark. Ingram and Lightning Source are the same company, but Lightning Source is for publishers and Ingram Spark is for kind of independent publishers or authors for extended distribution for the print. So technically bookstores will be able to order my book and get it in. So if someone were to walk into a bookstore and ask for it, the bookstore could order it through Ingram Spark.
So, okay, I'm trying to think through all the kind of pieces. So once it's kind of uploaded, that's kind of it. People can get it in all the different formats.
Exactly, and then you have to like market the shit out of it and make sure people see it. and Amazon ads are an increasingly bigger thing. So invest in some Amazon advertising so that your book is seen. Mm-hmm. And I am for the first time working with a book launch. I keep calling her my book launch coach, but really she's like my book launch manager who has a very specific system to help get your book to #1 in a category on Amazon. Ooh. And I've read her book on how to do it. I did not want to do it myself, which is why I hired her to do it for me. But basically, once you get to #1 in a category, Amazon will realize that your book is important and it will take out advertising on your behalf, including even like Google Ads, that kind of thing, to drive traffic to the book because they can see that it is a seller. So again, this is the first time I've used this strategy. It's the first time I've worked with this person, but she knows what she's doing. I've been in touch with her for the last few months, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that will change how my book gets out into the world in a bigger way.
Ooh, that's really cool. Maybe we should do a follow-up episode on the whole kind of like marketing process. What's her name? Can we link to her book in the show notes?
Yeah, absolutely. Her name is Michelle Culp. So I will link to the book in the show notes and also to her website. So usually what she does is she has this big package for kind of new authors where she not only helps you launch your book, but she also kind of helps you build a business around your book. So it's kind of for new entrepreneurs, new authors, where she just creates your whole world around your book. I didn't need that because I didn't, I've been doing online stuff for ages. So I've just hired her for launching the book.
Wow. This is a whole other world that I didn't know existed. This all sounds amazing. That I think one of the things that we hear a lot, certainly in kind of my business, I know a lot of friends who either have written books or want to write books. It's one of those things that has been on my list of things that I really want to do for a long time. But then there seems to be so many moving parts and so many decision points as to, it's almost like, well, writing the book is one thing. That's a huge thing in itself. But then there's the whole kind of, well, how do you go out there and how do you go in front of people? And one of the many things I love about you, Holly, is the fact that you are so good at just kind of laying out kind of like step by step. And then you do this and then you do this and then you do this. And it's just, it's glorious. Is there anything that I've forgotten? Anything that we've not... included?
Publicity. So marketing, I'm going to be doing myself, doing a lot of social media posting and that kind of thing. But also I have hired for the first time a publicist. Too, because I know I have so much stuff around this book. And while I have done the mindset work to get to the point where I am, like I said, I want to get it out there in a bigger way than I have any of my other books. And I know I don't trust myself to push myself.
We can have a chat about that after the recording.
That's a whole other conversation. So I don't trust myself to get the book out there in a big way on my own. So I've hired this publicist. She's got a team. It's these 3 women. One of them's a publicist. One of them's a graphic designer. One of them's an editor. And then between the 3 of them, they will work on different projects based on what people need. She will be organizing a blog tour for me, not just of people who will review the book on their blog, but also people who will, invite me to guest post on their blog. Also, she will be getting in touch with mainstream media to talk about the book. So that scares the crap out of me. And that's why I've hired her too. Yes. So there we are. So that's another big thing, which I have not invested in before, but I think it's really important for me to do that for this book and probably subsequent books.
And how can we, your beloved friends and listeners, how can we help you get this book out into the world?
You can buy it. You can read it. You can ask me for a review copy. You could recommend it to people.
Don't give it away, Holly. Make people buy it. Don't give it away.
Well, but the reality is, like, people do give away review copies of books to book bloggers who will, get it out there. So that is kind of standard process, whether you're traditionally published or independently published. So review copies do exist. So I will have limited review copies available for people if they're interested. But yeah, buy it, review it. Review it on Amazon. That's really, really important. Review it on Goodreads, mention it online, whatever. It just... mentioning it and getting it out there is a huge, huge help because that means that it gets in front of more eyes.
Okay, we'll be on it. So can we have a follow-up episode on this about the whole kind of process, the publicity? And also I'm fascinated to kind of dive in a little bit about this whole kind of like growth edge that you're leaning into because, to me, you're somebody, you've written... This is your 9th book. And yet I know this is one that is the tenderest. It's almost like you're kind of your child going out into the world and out to college. I'm sure you love all of your books and in exactly the same way. But there's something just really lovely in your transparency around the tenderness about this. And it's a real example that we do the hard things. That's how we get the growth. Yeah. And I love how you've been so open about this, and I want to do whatever I can to support you in this.
Thank you.
Get it out there, and just want to say, but you're amazing, and the book will be amazing because all your other books have been amazing, and I know how much work and energy you've put into this as well.
Oh, and this is the best book yet. My husband said to me as well, because he's he went through it at one point and he said, this is definitely your best book yet. And I know it is, because the more books I write, the better I become as a writer and the better I get at putting this whole thing together. So I definitely, even though it scares the crap out of me, I am definitely confident that this is my best book yet. So, yeah.
Well, Holly, thank you so much. We've got so much stuff that we can put in the show notes for kind of practical things. But I just want to say thank you so much for just being so damn honest about the whole thing. It's one of the things I've always kind of loved and admired about you, is the fact that you just, you kind of tell it like it is, and the reality of it. You don't kind of pretty up when it doesn't need prettying up, and at the same time you don't kind of go, oh, it's really hard, or it's, you're just very truthful and very honest and filled with integrity. So thank you, and I cannot wait for the book. I cannot wait to read the book.
I'm so excited to get it out. It's like, now that I'm kind of in the final stages of this project and it's like almost there, I'm really feeling, simultaneously terrified and excited, but really excited about getting this out there, because I've been talking about it so long. Unlike my other books, that I have lots of friends who are saying, I can't wait for it to come out, because, I've been talking about it. Finally. Whereas my other books, I was like, I would quietly write a book and quietly kind of put it out into the world, and there it was.
Yeah, it'd be like, oh, I have another book coming out next week. And I was like, what? You do? When did that happen? Yeah.
I know. And I was talking with a friend that I hadn't caught up with in a while, and we happened to be talking about books, and she said, oh, you wrote a book? And I said, yeah, I've written 8 books. And she went, oh, 8 books in 8 years. And I said, no, 8 books in 3 years. 3 years.
Yeah. Well, not quite 3 years, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, you're a marvel.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been a great conversation. Listeners, if you have questions, or if you want to go and gobble up a copy of Holly's book, which comes out on April 22nd?
Yes, Earth Day.
April 22nd, Earth Day, then we will have the links in the show notes, or you could just go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble online, or your local independent online book retailer, and type in Holly Wharton. What's the name of the book again?
It's called If Trees Could Talk, Life Lessons from the Wisdom of the Woods.
There you go.
Yes.
Holly, thank you so much, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found this interesting and useful. Please drop me a line. Let me know if you have any questions or thoughts. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com, or find me online and get in touch there. Thank you again for listening. If you have not yet subscribed, I would love to have you subscribe to my podcast. That way you can get updates every time a new episode goes live, which is every Monday. Next week's episode is a solo show, which I will be talking about. I don't know what yet. Tune in next week, and I'll probably be talking a little bit about the book and perhaps my process, but we shall see. The book has been kind of overwhelming my thoughts and projects lately, so tune in next week, and I look forward to speaking to you. And remember to visit hollywharton.com/298 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.